Hopin. Hello, everyone. Glad to have you all here. I can see that in a waiting room, still people adding to our waiting room. So I will try to add everyone here. First of all, thank you so much, Kambis, joining us, having you on board. It's a great pleasure. And it's a great pleasure having you in a first, actually, Invest in Tech virtual coffee. And great to have you here.
Thank you as well. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for the invitation, Sam.
Sure. Well, let's start it like this. Over the next 60 minutes or so, we are gonna cover a few topics, as we already mentioned also in our description. What we will do is to split the 60-minute into 4 15-minute slots. It will make our audience life also easier, probably. And we're gonna have 4 different topics. The first one is gonna be the introduction. The second one will go dive into the 2020 startup community, what has happened to the startup community during the year 2020, and then some hints and some examples of what has happened in the fundraising and as well as in the startup scene. And then in the third slot, we will go into the COVID-19 impacts on technologies and how it can actually influence our future. And then at the end, we will also wrap it up with some hints and some ideas about the post-COVID-19 holistic transformations, or someone also can call it exit strategies from the COVID-19 for companies. And at the end of the slot 4, we will have also a couple of minutes open for Q&A sessions. If anyone wants to ask any question, please feel free to write it in the chat box. So I will read it through and go on. Perfect. So I want to talk about the year 2020, of course, and what has happened to the startup community from the different perspective. Of course, COVID-19 has also a lot of impacts on on our startup community. We are based mainly in DACH region, so we will probably also tap into the Austrian, German startup community, and potentially also about startups, founders, idea owners, if they have any the future, how they should look in 2021. But before starting, I want to touch on what make you, Kambis, who you are at the moment, and your background, and also your current role and position. Tell me a bit more about yourself, your experience in the community.
Sure. So thank you. Thank you everyone for participating and watching us. My name is Kambis. I've been in the startup ecosystem for around almost like 10 years now. So I started in 2011 with my first startup right after finishing like my bachelor studies at the Vienna University of Economics and Business. So I've been like an entrepreneur myself for a lot of years now. I've set up different startups in various industries, various verticals. So there's no like specific focus I've like pursued. So from edutech to HR to robotics to nutrition. So it's pretty diverse. Which was always quite challenging for me, because once I entered a specific industry, I didn't have knowledge of, so I had to start like reading myself into it and learning. And since December now, officially, I've been appointed to the head of startup services at the Austrian Economic Chambers, which is a quite very responsible position for me as well. Because what I do, what I'm supposed to do is like representing all startups here in Austria, and share, let's say, the interest, fight for the interest, work for the interest, and so on. So it's quite a big responsibility. So it's more in the policymaking side now, but all the entrepreneurial background I have and all the experiences, I try to like bring it to the position. So they were looking someone from praxis. That was very important, and that's why in the end they chose me. And let's see how it works out. But I'm very into it, and we've already initiated the first like activities so that we can like address the issues startups have currently in Austria. Yeah.
Great, great. Thank you. It's a great pleasure. Also, congratulations to you for getting this position. That's I think that can add huge value to the startup community. Of course, now you can also talk about your experience in 2020, the startup scene, what has happened, and so on and so forth. But just to open the discussion, despite all that has happened in a startup ecosystem, the pandemic year, what has happened in a fundraising scene, and also in new ideas, who wants actually the people who wants to bring the new idea to the market. Of course, being in a COVID has influenced a lot these kind of decisions and initiatives. But we have also seen skyrocketed valuations, records in VC investments. A lot of companies also have managed to raise huge monies, actually. But that would be also interesting to hearing from you. What was actually the main sectors which has benefited from the COVID and the pandemic in 2020, and the ones who not actually have some pitfalls, have some drawbacks during this COVID-19 situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what you see, apart from like typical like VC funding, you see more frequent like IPOs, particularly in the US, also in Asia. A lot of startups who are running now for IPOs, also in Europe, they want to do the same because they see how successful IPOs can be in the US. Just take a look at Airbnb. It's in the tourism industry, which has been like one of the industries who has been like impacted negatively the most overall. And still, the valuation went up like from day one. Still, I mean, sure, it can also go down, but it shows like how much trust they have in these new digital business models in industries like tourism and so on. And this is like gives like motivational boost and ambitions to say, okay, we want to do the same. So what I believe we will see like in the next year is also like more European startups who are big now, who want to run for IPOs as well and get high valuations. Airbnb was just one example. Now getting back to like, let's say, typical VC funding, also here, if you take a look at the numbers in Europe, it has been like rising, even in times of like COVID, no matter which ecosystem you're looking for. Also in Austria, the numbers are rising. So more and more like investors will bring their money into like startups. You can see the same with Austria. So that shows, okay, even in times like COVID, which is like one of the biggest health crises we've seen, and also economic crises, investments in startups are not like slowing down; they are going up, and that's what I believe we will see next years as well. Particularly in Austria, where the overall, let's say, volume in investment is still rather small compared to other countries. There's so much more room for potential to like for investments. So it was a good year in terms of investments, and there have been like also some kind of, particularly, let's take a look in Austria or Germany and so on, there have been some kind of relief funds and aid funds that were trying to boost even more like startup investments. In Austria, it was called the COVID Startup Hilfsfonds, which is now in discussion to prolong it or not, and so on. But the thing is, these kind of aids and funds, they help really boosting like investments. And sure, you can see like specific like activities in health tech, digital health tech, med tech, also in startups who are like in the remote working industries, also like fintech, financial tech, whatever. So there are specific industries which are quite, let's say, resistant when it comes to like crises like COVID and so on, which even profit when there are crises. Think about health tech, usually all this stuff like considering like the vaccine and so on, but not just the vaccine, overall to digitize the health tech processes, let's say, or the health processes within like a country. These are huge industries who are like speeding up. They're speeding up right now, but they're speeding up in the coming years as well. Let's say remote working. Think about, and this is very important, you have to differentiate between the regions and the cultures, because it's different. There's a difference when it comes to remote working in Europe or in the US or in Asia. Some are like further, some are more like behind. But let's say, for instance, in Austria, Germany, Switzerland, just the GSE region. Here, for instance, remote working is not like the mainstream. Okay, for startups, yes, But when you take a look at SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, so the whole mainstream, it's not like usual to do remote working. Maybe they have tried and so on, but still it's not like the mainstream. So what you will see in the upcoming months and years is that, and I'm not someone who says, okay, it will be total remote working. I don't believe in this. I think there will be personal contact as well. And this will be important for people to interact with others. So this kind of social interaction. But the thing, what you see is even those who have been very resistant when it comes to like, remote working, home work, office and so on, they will go further and further into this direction. So there will be some kind of like healthy balance between on-site working and remote work on the other hand. So these are the things you will see rising. And because of the things you will see rising, there will also be potential for startups to provide solutions who address exactly this kind of challenge. Okay. So I think that's very important to, again, differentiate between the regions. So Austria is not Europe per se, and Europe is not the world per se. So there are differences where you are. And also think about the differences between urban areas and rural areas. When we always think about like solutions, technological solutions, and so on, I believe we tend to think about like from an urban perspective, but not from a rural perspective. But take a look in Austria, in Europe, in the world, wherever you are, the rural population is a huge part. So think about, okay, what kind of solutions do they need? People there working, their companies there, located like in rural areas, do they have like different interests when it comes to like let's say companies or people in urban areas? And yeah, there are differences. Just think about mobility. Okay, we all believe, okay, yeah, mobility, it should be sustainable. It should be like public transport and all this stuff. That's true, particularly urban areas. But think about rural areas. There, you don't have like the infrastructure you have in, like, let's say in Vienna or in Berlin or in London, wherever. So think about the people there. What kind of solutions do they need? And I have the impressions that we're sometimes very one-sided when it comes to like addressing this issue. So depending also where you're located within the specific location, you need different solutions. And that's where the potential for startups comes in, because you say, okay, I can develop solutions that also address people who are, for instance, not in urban areas. And that's just to sum it up. So I think the region, the culture is one very important aspect to startup solutions. And the other one is like where you're located within like a specific location, even if it's like urban or rural.
I see. Yeah, exactly what you said it. And also to put it out there, like you touched upon solutions which has been actually added value to the remote working, like project management tools, some online conference tools like Zoom that we're using right now. But like recently I read it in the news that the London-based online event platform, which is called Hopin, actually have managed to raise a huge amount of money with a valuation of crazy valuation of 2.1 billion. Just beginning, like in 8 months, they raised $170 million, and that was actually quite massive number. And I think it's a success for them. And if it hasn't been any pandemics, that would be actually really difficult to get in that short amount of time. And also, you also mentioned the health tech and digital health industry, of course. And I don't know how you see it from your perspective now that government sees that how startups can add value in a digital health scene. The regulations has become also a little bit easier on them. I can see that now the government is also getting more motivations and also create some incentives for startup owners in a digital health sector to bring their idea to the market if they can solve it. In France, for example, the government moved quickly. Some legalizations, some, for example, in case of the consultations, online consultations, now it's easier to cover it with the insurance. Germany has done the same, meaning that the GPs can already actually write down those like sessions that having online with their clients, basically on the insurance bills. So that's getting much easier, in my opinion, as well, from the government, from the legalization point of view.
I agree with you. And that's an important point. So the government can boost like a specific developments by incentivization, for instance. It can be like money-based, but it doesn't have to be money-based only. But the thing is, so the government has the power to influence certain developments. I give you another example here in Austria. We have it's called in German, it's AWS Investitionsprämie, which is like if a company invests in, let's say, digitization or let's say in sustainable mobility for the company, then whatever they spend, they can get up to 14% in terms of money back again from the government. And this has this has led to, let's say, for every euro that was spent, or let's say every euro that was covered by this relief aid or the Investitionspremium, led to a multiplier of 10 euros in terms of investment. So for every €1 that was covered, 10 euros was spent or invested by companies in Austria. And this is how the government influence a specific development in a very positive way. You also mentioned, again, let's go back to the topic about health tech and medtech and so on. So think about very simple things like, for instance, meeting up with my doctor virtually. Okay, this is just doesn't seem so special, but the thing is, now think about the cultural aspect as well. So the thing is, and in South Korea, for instance, there is even a specific term for it. It's called untagged. So untagged is refers to contact-free, let's say, industry. So that's the focus now. It's a huge industry going there on, and it's something that also is which you can see here in Europe as well. It's just not called untagged, but you can see it here. So the thing is, just switching from let's say physical meetups with doctors to virtual is already a big step for some people, culturally as well. So that's, again, I want to bring back the topic about their difference between each region and cultures. So some solutions will be implemented much faster in certain cultures than in others. Okay, even if it's for us, it doesn't sound so like a huge step. It is, and that's what I think startups need to look at. Okay, not just from their perspective, but from the perspective of the others, from the whole population. What are the things they are changing right now, and where there's potential to move in? And even for us, meeting up with a virtual doctor is nothing special. For a lot of people, it is, and now it's a time to spend into solutions that go into these directions. Okay, that's something I want to just to add to motivate startups to do.
Interesting. Just let me get back to what you also mentioned in your talk about the government help, those aids that they receive, actually, like startups can apply for it and receive it. Because this question, I receive it quite often from my coaching sessions with the startups I'm working with, that it should be applied for every COVID aid or any kind of helps that the government is offering to the startups. Should we go for all of them? Is that have any influence or any impacts on the future fundraising phases that they want to actually tap into angel investors, VCs? Can it be affected negatively or positively if they can actually receive helps from the government?
So from an investor's perspective, if you get easy access to money, why shouldn't you go for it? Actually, from investor's perspective, this would be logical and entrepreneurial to say, okay, if there is some kind of quick wins in terms of funding, go for it. If you don't do it, then for me, it's more stranger why you don't do this. Okay. So actually, I think it boosts even more. And I mean, the thing is, what you can maybe criticize is are these startups that would be able to succeed if they don't get this government aid? But to be honest, that relates to every company out there right now. Okay, so there are a lot of aids. Startups is just one small part of it in terms of funding or in terms of government funding. And the thing is, if they would be able to succeed without this kind of aid, but if you have the opportunity, go for it. That's what I would advise. Go for it. Take the opportunity, and it will even boost your funding even more. also in future
See,
wise.
I see. That makes total sense. Yeah. And yeah, that is basically some sectors that you also mentioned. One of the other sectors I would also want to mention here is that the online food startup, like the startups who has been actually working in the online food industry, let's call it like online food vertical. So they had also a huge win, if we can call it, during the pandemic, because I can remember it like a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, I was looking into different solutions, different startups in US-based startups. And I saw one of the startups who has been working specifically on delivering grocery products to your doorstep, basically. And that was something that wasn't existed before in Europe. And now we can see that, as you mentioned it, in different regions, based on the cultures of those regions and also the people who should actually get used to these kind of solutions. A lot of startups popping up. For example, Glovo is actually one of them, a grocery order company which jumped more than 300% in Spain, which was really actually interesting for me. And also the other ones, like we have it also a UK-based Mindful Chef, which is also experienced exactly almost 500% increase in the recipe box. And even in one of those accelerators that I've been working with, which is basically more local accelerator in Linz, Linz, Austria, they also receive some homemade, created the startup, and they receive actually from their peer-to-peer clients some homemade recipes in order to create some food at home, and then they deliver also all the ingredients and also all the groceries. And that specific startup has also raised a lot of money during the pandemic, which shows how online food industry is evolving as well during the pandemic. And yeah, and I think these are all positive things, because in one of my discussions with them, the owner, the founder of the company mentioned that back then, getting a deal with supermarkets and also getting on board supermarkets was really tough. And now these days they're asking us to help them and let them to get on board and become actually an online market for their products. And that's how the future can be different, I would say. And also in terms of the city, we are mainly talking about Germany, Austria, and Switzerland in our talk, but I heard that Amsterdam is one of the winners of 2020. Because they made a huge, I mean, not just the 2020, if you look at it at the 5-year span of the previous years, you can see that Amsterdam already has more than 2,700 startups, meaning that 1.1 per 1,000 inhabitants. And that's huge in terms of the numbers. And I would love to also see some stats about like Vienna, for example, because it's one of the startups hubs in Europe and trying to become one of the top ones, Berlin as well. And these numbers shows that how startups, how communities, how regulations and government can help startups to become actually one of the top numbers in Europe, and also become easier for them to come to the market, especially in health sector or in ed tech, for example, which legals and regulations are tougher. Yeah, so
just let me add to this, because you mentioned like Amsterdam. Amsterdam and the whole like Netherlands are very good in when it comes to deregulation. So they are very liberal when you want to set up your business, when you want to like create new digital solutions, technologies, and so on. And this is one of the main advantages. They are deregulated. So this can be like a role model for like other hubs as well. And they have also positioned themselves very successfully compared to, let's say, London. I mean, nothing against London, because London is still going up when it comes to like startup funding. So the numbers are really promising there. But because of like now the breakout of the UK from the European Union, Amsterdam has positioned itself very successfully as like an alternative. So a lot of like companies, not just startups, but also corporates and so on, and institutions have moved to Amsterdam as well. And when we talk about like a good startup ecosystem, I now prefer to think about more like a holistic ecosystem. So not just about startups, but an ecosystem where you have like innovation overall, from startups, from companies, from corporates, from SMEs, from the public, from the authorities, and so on. And this creates a good, very innovative like ecosystem. And that's where Amsterdam is very good at, and that's why it works there so good.
Great. Yeah, true. Well, now that we are diving actually to the second half of our virtual coffee, let's talk more about how you see the future, like 2021, and if the impact of COVID-19 can positively or negatively stays with the startup community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's start with the last point. The thing is, now regarding my own portfolio of startups, I've been like operationally active like throughout the last years. Some have, let's say, all have been impacted, but some positive and some negative. So it depends on the product you have and on the industry you like working at. For instance, now as an example, mobility. Okay, I have a startup who has been affected very negatively, which is like a carpooling application for commuters, so going to work. And the thing is, if there is like a COVID outbreak and people don't go to work, for instance, and they're just staying at home working, then there's no usage for this kind of product. So the thing is, they've been impacted very negatively. On the other hand, and the thing is, how are we capable to manage these kind of situations? This, from like a founder's team, is very, very important to understand. Okay, is my product now in terms of like COVID fit as well? Is there a product market fit, or has it changed? And once it has changed, the thing is, how fast can you act on this? How fast can you pivot? How fast can you like create a product that addresses like the new market in demand, or let's say the changed market demand that is out there? So this is a very important thing you have to consider. Then overall, what you see, and which is not has started right now, but it has started like before as well, you see a digitization process through all industries. And I remember, and I think some of you might know it as well, there's a very nice visualization about like what kind of factor has changed like innovation. Was the CEO, the CFO, or was it COVID-19? And the thing is now, again, let's go back to the mainstream. You have like the niches, and you have like specific like industries that are very innovative, okay? But it's usually not the mainstream. And this is now where the huge potential comes in, where you will see all the digitalization through all the SMEs we have in Austria, in Germany, in Switzerland, in the whole of Europe. This is actually the backbone of like the economic system we have, the SMEs, the smaller companies, the medium-sized companies. And the thing is, they are undergoing a huge digitalization process, and much faster as they've like been looking forward before. So this is something we'll see in, this relates to like different activities, from remote working to, let's say, HR processes, to education. Think about e-learning, also like from a corporate perspective. So you will see this digitization through different activities and industries, okay? And it's accelerating. And now the question is, how fast is it accelerating? Because now, if we are now again taking a more comparative perspective, you want to compete, let's say Europe with Asia, okay? Or let's say with North America and so on. The thing is, all regions are now digitizing. And the thing is, how fast can, for instance, Europe digitize compared to the others? That's the main question. Not if it does, but the thing is, how fast? Okay, that's the main question. What I also see is like, as from a public and a company perspective, you need to be more like acting in terms of like scenarios. So think about COVID-19. It got devastated some industries and some business models and revenue models and all this stuff. The thing is, how can you be like flexible enough in future to be resistant when it comes to like crises like this? Because this won't be the last crisis. Okay, so I think you will see in terms of like from an organizational perspective, much more scenario acting. Also when it comes to like implementing solutions and so on. So you have to be prepared. Okay, what happens when factor A starts and factor B comes later and so on. This is something I think you will see like from an organizational perspective. Apart from that, sure, I think I mentioned before, like with South Korea, the untagged industry. So from online shopping, from food delivery to chatbots to appointments with virtual doctors or a physician or whatever, this you will see. Again, main question is how fast you will see it. In South Korea, you will see it faster than I believe, like for instance, in Austria. But this doesn't mean anything. The thing is, we now have to act just faster, okay? And also like everything that relates to like remote working. There are even like new funds, startup funds and investment funds have been created just to invest into solutions that are about remote working. And there I will see a much bigger, let's say, balance between on-site and remote work. And why is it so important? Because the way we work changes a lot of other industries as well. It changes mobility, it changes logistics, it changes even like your travel behavior and all this stuff. So this is like one primary industry that affects a lot of other industries. Okay, this is something that is important, but also like particularly let's say in Austria now, tourism. So tourism, the industry has been already more digitized than other industries because you have to have a website, sell your products or sell your services and so on. There have been a lot of platform business models in recent years. And now the thing is, what's the next step? What's happening now afterwards? Has the travel behavior changed totally for like tourists? I'm not sure about it. I know a lot of people say now, okay, the airline industries and travel industry is changed, is gone. I don't believe in this, to be honest. What I think you will see just a much more sustainable approach. You will see like different engine technologies and so on that will like erupt, like just with automotive. You will see the same with airlines. I'm not sure if it like if the frequency goes down in terms of traveling, but you will add other components, let's say virtual reality, augmented reality. So the people are more like open to this right now. There have been solutions for 5 years now, for 10 years, but now it's a time where people are starting, okay, I'm open for this, let's do this. Yeah.
That's exactly the case, that getting open to new solutions that probably before COVID, no one would actually expect to come that fast to us. And that's also pushing us to the last topic, which we wanted to talk about, the COVID-19 exit strategies. And you just mentioned that we have to be fast as SMEs or already also startups. But one other question is that how much should your organization pivot? Like, we are talking about pivoting and we are talking about adaptation and everything when it comes to startup, but how fast it should be and how much we should actually do that. Is it, for example, if I have already a company which affected hugely by COVID, should I change the business model? Should I change the whole concept? Or I can actually still working on my model and some pivots and being fast, I can actually adjust myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, what comes in my mind is like market research overall. Okay, the thing is, not just like because of COVID, but the thing is, as a company, as a startup, you should like do constant market research because market demand is now dynamic. It's not static. So it changes all the time, not just because of COVID, but it changes all the time. So the thing is, you have to have some kind of approach that is very dynamic. So you always have to do market research. And in times of COVID, it's even more important. So the thing is, once it broke out, the thing is, how fast have been companies able to act on this, to see what do the competitors do, not just in Austria, but internationally, because think about it, it started in China and then it went to Europe and so on. So there was some kind of time lag. And the thing is, there was enough time to prepare your business and business model. Let's say if it comes over to you, how should you act? If you have been very smart and very, let's say, cautious, okay? Because you couldn't expect it 100%. But if you have been very smart and cautious, then yes. So the thing is, how fast could you react like on these new circumstances? The thing is, if you need a pivot or not, the thing is, this depends on different factors. So one thing is, has the market demand changed? The second thing is, so meaning, is there like more demand or less demand for a product? Some have benefited and some not. Then the second thing is, has customer behavior changed? So are they now looking for something else? And if not now, maybe in the upcoming months? Because the thing is, if there is a crisis and it's like going on for months and months, it can change customer behavior in the long run as well. Okay, and this is something you have to like foresee and anticipate to act on this. Now going back to the pivot, the thing is, or let's say another factor, how long can you sustain with the current business model? Do you have enough cash? And do you believe that once COVID is, let's say, somehow over, does the customer behavior go back to good old times? So this is now the question. Has it changed the customer behavior, or is it going back to good old times? And do you have enough financial stability to say, okay, I just wait and wait and wait, and once it gets back, I will do the same as I've been always doing. What I recommend is like, even if you believe that customer behavior will go back to the as it was before, you should think about pivoting or creating new products that are like fit for this kind of situation as well. So it doesn't mean that you have to abandon your main product, but at least try to establish a new product, a new service that is resistant to crises like this. Okay, and then you can still see, okay, what works and what doesn't. That's something I think you really have to do. Otherwise, if you just wait and get the government aids and all this stuff, it can be then too late to react.
And if I may add to that, I would also like, when it comes to this pivoting question and also talking about how we can actually cope in a long term with the current situation, I always say that the agility and also stability should be actually hand in hand. So these two should actually happen together when it comes to the startup scene and also SMEs, to be honest. If your organization doesn't move quickly at the moment, as you mentioned, now it's also worldwide, the same notion, it will lose balance. And if you lose balance, then in a long term, you will have some difficulties. And that's why the stability needs also agility to not to lose basically the balance that your company needs. And then the same idea, what you also mentioned it, that in order to be able to understand what you should do in a long term, you have to always see two pillars. One would be actually the portfolio moves, like how, as you mentioned it, how your target audience changing their behavior during the pandemic, or how optimistic you are that they're getting back to their pre-COVID-19 behavior. And on the other side, like performance improvement, you have to also think inside, in-house, how you can actually improve your performance with cutting some costs, which is not necessary, or working in your company structure in order to be able to survive the whole situation. And that's how it should be done. Just one note to our audience, if there's any questions, we are actually running into the last slot, 15 minutes of our virtual coffee. We already have one question. If anyone else want to post, please feel free to put it in a chat box here. So Kambis, one more question about the COVID-19 exit strategy. We already said that there are some important factors that companies, startups, SMEs should actually take into consideration in order to be able to exit this basically current situation of the COVID-19. But what are the most important elements when it comes to the exit strategy? Are we at the moment that we should think about the exit strategy, or we are still should basically cover some risks, be careful about not to be hit from another direction? How should we see it? Is it a good timing to think about the exit strategy or not?
If this is your, or let's say if this has been your goal from the beginning to create a startup and exit, yeah, I don't think there's like any kind of change to this. In specific industries, it can be like exactly the right time to do it. Remote working, digital health tech, and so on. These are like where all the money is going, or a huge part of it. So yes, there's no change in my opinion. If you have or if you had this goal right from the beginning, so you can still go for your exit strategy. But what I believe is very important for the investors is that they can see that you, your product and your business model is still successful in COVID times, and this is something you have to prove. How do you, as a company, as founders, as a team, react like on these difficult times? This is something you have to show in numbers, to show them, okay, has there been some kind of growth, or did you pivot and have a new product, and how is it going on? So you need to prove this in order to be interesting. Apart from this, if you are like in specific industries, like before mentioned, digital health tech and remote working and like also e-commerce and so on, then there is something where a lot of investors are like giving even more attention to it. Okay, so these two things, yeah. So prove that you're even like in terms of like COVID able to succeed as a company, that you can show growth. And on the other hand, if you're in one of these specific industries, there's automatically like interest there.
Now, of course, as you mentioned also before, some of the VC funds already established to target some of these verticals, like looking at specific solutions, like remote working solutions, because they can see in long term probably there is some like profits coming from these sectors which will focus on remote working. And also one of the questions from our audience is that how you see the long-term effects of COVID and pandemics in Austria and Germany specific. You pointed out it's the difference of the culture can play a role here, but when we see more than 1 year, let's look at beyond to 2021, how this can affect like remote working. Is it a concept in 2022 as well, or the other elements which has been affected by impact by COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you, Rahim, for the question. I had discussions with people who believe like everything is not changed. You know, COVID is now, there's like pre-COVID and post-COVID, and post-COVID is everything different. I don't believe that everything will change like in the long run as it has been before. Okay, so if you think about historically, there have been a lot of crises throughout like the last decade, and people usually went back to business. But the thing is, when it comes to specific behaviors, there has been some kind of long-lasting change. Now, when I get back to your question, Rahim, let's say, for instance, remote working. Yeah, I believe now remote working is more mainstream, and it's getting more mainstream. Why? Not because the companies want it, but the people who work for the companies who say, hey, I need now some kind of flexibility. I need some combination between on-site and remote working, and they're demanding it. And because they're demanding it, it just will take time, or it will be just some time until like it will be really part of the mainstream culture, working culture here in Austria as well. Okay, not just in Austria, but in other countries. So this is something I think it will change, but it's not like everyone is now remote working. There are like some discussion where I say everyone is not going remote working. No, I don't believe this. I think social, personal interaction is still very important, but there will be some kind of combination. And now, if you think from a meter perspective, what you will see, in my opinion, is like more heterogeneous industries. Okay, so whatever industries we're talking about, there will be like different movements, different demands, and the thing is, how can you address all these different demands? I think this is a very huge challenge we have. This regarding your question.
Sure. And the second question from Mayo comes about the Brexit. And you mentioned that the startup scene in London, and also we have an example of Hopin mentioned in the platform, the online platform, event management platform. Mayo asked if in the investment scene in a startup that despite Brexit can actually survive and thrive as it is.
I mean, just from a logical point of view, you would think, okay, if UK is not part of the European Union, they will suffer and London will suffer, but that's not what you see. And I don't think you will see that in future as well, because I think they're smart enough. So what, and even if there is a lot of political discussion and here and there and so on, they are smart enough to maintain an infrastructure that is still very interesting for founders from abroad, but also from investors from abroad. If it impacts, I mean, sure, it can also have some kind of negative impact, but that's not what you see right now. So I'm not willing to say, okay, they will suffer and so on. I think they're still putting like an emphasis on collaboration with all the other ecosystems. And you have to differentiate between London and UK. Okay, that's very important. Okay, so London is not per se UK, and UK is not per se London. So even if UK overall as a or the United Kingdom or England and so on are going into another direction, London has always been very special, okay, regarding the region. So the thing is, I think they will be smart enough to still have all these bridges and collaborations with the ecosystem, not just in Europe, but worldwide. But I believe it's still now the time for the other European hubs, tech hubs, innovation hubs, to accelerate their like growth. Okay, so there is opportunity for them to get better. Not that London will lose out, but that the others will accelerate their growth as well. Okay.
What I would also add, Kambis, to this question, to answering this question, is that we can, despite what has happened and with Brexit and all, like something that is vague, we don't know what are the details of the Brexit deal and so on. But we can see that big names from US market, like Sequoia Capital, one of the biggest, let's say the US VCs, which is behind the Google, Airbnb, DoorDash, and also WhatsApp, they decided to come to Europe and starting from London, basically. So they established it in UK, in their branch in UK, and they're using, basically positioning themselves in UK in order to invest across Europe. And that shows us basically how the market is evolving, and probably Brexit will not that much influence, as you put it, the current status. The next question coming from Wolfgang, asking about social-driven startups, the impact of social-driven startups, and how you see it in the market. Right now, we can see a lot of movements in Europe and Africa. How do you see that, and where can a startup in this sector or vertical can receive support?
That's a very good point, Wolfgang. Thank you for this. So didn't mention like impact as like an industry before, but there also see a lot of potential, and it also gets more mainstream, and that's a good positive, like let's say a positive aspect, because it means that people are more willing and more open to this kind of solutions, but also investors. There's even like a term like impact investor, which has been like rising within the last years, and it's rising as well. And now taking a look from the European perspective, you have like, for instance, the Horizon 2020 program, which involves like particular solutions in, let's say, green technologies, female entrepreneurship, health tech, life sciences, but also impact. So impact is a huge role. This is something where Europe can position itself very successful compared to other regions as well. The thing is, how can you set vehicles for, like, for instance, investors to invest even more in startups who are like within the fields of impact? But the thing is, impact is pretty broad. So how do you differentiate here? Are you talking about social? Are you talking about like more equality? Are you talking about like, let's say in food? So impact is something that relates to all other industries, okay? So it's not just an industry itself, but it affects all the other industries. And I believe now startups and companies, when they start something, they have to think about how can they produce impact short and long term right from scratch, right from the beginning. So this is not something you think about later. You have to do it now, because I think it will be the standard, the status quo in future, that when you have a business, okay, what's the impact? Can you measure the impact? Can you put it down in numbers? where do you affect it? This is something I think that it's very important. Now you said about education. Yeah, education is one part of it. Also here, different regional developments. For instance, also think about India. You have mentioned that India is huge when it comes to educational technologies. They're one of the biggest edtech startups worldwide. They're spending a lot of money there, investing a lot of money there. They're a very mobile and young population that are open to this kind of solution. Just with education, it can be very political. So from a startup perspective, it can be difficult if you want, for instance, you have a new edtech solution and you want to implement it, let's say in schools, okay? Then it can be quite difficult because it's very political. So again, there are like regional factors that means either it's more difficult or easier to like go for it. When you say, let me check for many questions. Education for long in some where you can get support. I mean, we can do some kind of follow-up and talk about it in detail if you want and see what are the opportunities out there. But there are like even grants who are focusing on impact startups. Let's say FFG in Austria, you have like a grant specifically for impact startups, which is called Impact Innovation. The same with AWS, also Wirtschaftsservice. They have a grant called AWS Creative Impact, who are targeting particular like startups who are really generating impact. You just have to show it how you're gonna create impact.
Mm-hmm. And also to add to that, I saw actually that impact investing and responsible investing, as you put it, there is a broad range of impact investing. And when it comes to, for example, climate tech, which is one of the subsectors, we can see a huge jump from 400 million approximately in 2013 to 2020 is 16.3 billion investments in responsible investing. So that move can be seen obviously from the investor's point of view. Let's jump to the next question from Parnian. How would you suggest the startups network during the first basically half of the 2021, especially the early stage startups, given that we don't have that much venues to go to as an early startup, or it's difficult to get to all those, how someone can promote or network?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the reduction of all these like places where you can go, events, exhibitions, and so on to present yourself, your product or service. This is one of the most negative factors regarding startups. The WKO, the Austrian Economic Chamber, we even ran like a survey throughout whole of Austria, where it showed that this is like one of the two top negative factors affecting startups, that they don't have some kind of place where they can present the product or network with others. So as long as it's not like this is the case, and it will take still some months, okay, until we will see like the next big event. So think about summer, okay? That's what I believe, but hopefully before. The only thing you can do is like being more actively or be more active online. So the thing is, how can I do this? Yeah, attend like virtual events. As you've done before, sure, a virtual event is not like an on-site event. It's different. The networking effect is not the same, but that's something you have to do. Also use all your social networks and social media channels to push yourself, to make you present. This is something very important from a marketing perspective. You need to stay in the minds of people, not just on one channel, but use all the channels you're active on, like 5, 6 different channels. Be active, just spread your content, because if you want to convince someone from a marketing perspective, you need to send this person 5 to 8 like different like messages until you stay in their minds. So think about if you have like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, I don't know, Instagram, all these are channels. If you are there, try to present, spread your content, engage with the community. So you have the virtual events, you have like the social networks, but the thing is, you have to stay present to stay in the minds of the people. Okay, this is something very important, and I think you will succeed with that.
Great. Next question from Azim. I know that we have not that much time left, but let's go with the next question. Azim asks, despite the current situation of the pandemics, how we can actually succeed? Is it first Should we cut some costs, reducing the long-term assets or short-term loans?
So the thing is, from a company perspective, and this is something that's the way I am. Okay, I prefer more like even in times of crisis, try to grow even further. You know, to spend even more. This is something I would suggest also from a startup perspective, because you have to differentiate between a startup and a standard SME. That's very important, because startups' main focus is to grow, and if you can't show the grow, okay, how do you want to create valuation for your company? Huh? So from a startup perspective, the goal needs always to be to grow better. So take the loans, spend the money, invest it to go 1, 2, 3 steps further. Okay, this also like from a entrepreneurial perspective, this is the approach I would take. But the thing is, still there are ways to cut costs. There are quick wins, particularly in Austria and Germany and some other European countries. There have been some good, really government aids. So the thing is, you have to act fast, take all these aids as far as it goes, but still try to go for growth. Okay, so you can combine it. You can also say cut costs on the one hand, but on the other hand, I take into loans and then I start to like invest and grow even further. But the thing is, from a startup perspective, you need to grow. Okay, you're not an SME. Okay, that's something I would just keep in mind.
Great, thanks. And the last question coming from Rahim regarding your current position at WKO. How do you see the plans existing involving more AI-based startups, considering the pandemic situation in digital health as well?
Yeah, I mean, AI is a very important topic. There's like organizations like AI Austria who are like even just addressing this kind of issue, and also at the WKO, AI is a huge topic. We're working on this, and we'll also like start exchanging with like companies and startups in particular regarding this topic in the upcoming weeks even more. So this is something, Rahim, we can talk on later on. But the thing is, AI in particular is a strong topic at the Austrian Economic Chambers. There are like task forces who are thinking and evaluating and planning like initiatives to somehow position Austria as an AI hotspot as well. This could be a vertical that is still very competitive. Just think about China, for instance, how huge you are when it comes to AI, or like the US and so on. But still, when you combine like deregulation factors with knowledge that is already there, the companies, the corporates and startups, then you can still position yourself very successfully within a specific need. Also, AI is broad, and there are like different like feeds within AI. So yes, there are plans. There are task forces. We are now trying to set up a plan how we can create like an infrastructure in Austria where more companies in Austria within the fields of AI like are created, but on the other hand, also other companies move here. And this is something we can talk then later on if you want, because it's a huge topic.
What I can also add to that, in case of Germany, each province is also working heavily on the AI concept. They have their own AI. For example, Hamburg has AI Hamburg, and their initiative, that's basically an initiative which comes with some funding for AI solutions, which they want to actually develop the solution in AI. And on the other side, also for VCs and venture capitals, which they want to actually focus on AI sector. Perfect. I think we are run out of it. One last question quickly, Kombis. From inside company point of view, sustainability and adaptation with pandemic, how long can consist financially, functionally, growth while challenging crisis? That's from inside company view.
Is it a question or a statement? So in position with pandemic, how long can consist financially? Yeah, please let's know more.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Just add more on this one.
Yeah.
So the thing is, from a company perspective, I think you need to be very fast and have an overview. Okay, what are the aids that are out there from a public perspective, but also from a private perspective? This is something you need to take an overview. Even at the WKO side, you see a lot of like the aids that are out there. The second thing is, these times show as a team how fast you can react and how flexible you can be. This is another factor, okay? Is it the right team to be, if you have a team, for instance, do you have the right team to act like fast enough and on this, okay? On the one hand, you need to cut costs then regarding the factors and the opportunities you have very fast. And better you take more like aids, or you put them more aids into practice and whatever is out there instead of too little. So try to get all the things that are out there, use them. On the other hand, still go for growth. Okay. Another thing is, can you grow with your current product or you need to pivot? Very important. Always look at the market, how is it changing? Because if there has been a pandemic for 3 months, then you won't have some long-lasting like behavioral change. Yeah? But now, because it's going almost 1 year, okay, in March, you will see long-lasting like behavior changes. That's for sure. In some areas more than the others. This is something I can tell you. And apart from that, the thing is, pandemic is very hard for you, for your let's say from a mental perspective, for your health, for your families, and so on. The thing is, still, even if it's so difficult, the only way I see as an entrepreneur is like to look forward, to go forward. Okay, not think in the present. Not only, but also in the future. This is what particular startup entrepreneurs have to do. Okay, think about the future. Have still a positive like mindset when it comes to it, even if it's difficult. And go on, go on, go on. And in the end, in most cases, it will deliver. Okay.
What you mentioned just reminded me of one quote from a philosopher, says that no one ever steps in the same river twice, for it not the same river it is, and they are not the same person. So that's exactly the notion that we should go on. And even though the pandemic has influenced us a lot personally, and also, of course, at work and in our business, but life is going on. So we have to, we know some challenges coming. We already passed a lot of challenges, and we always should see if potentials ahead of ourselves and go forward, I think.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kambis, for being with us. And thank you, everyone, for participating in this episode of Invest-in-TEK Virtual Coffee. I hope to see you all in our next sessions and next episodes. And thank you. Thank you, Kambis.
Thank you as well. Good luck and see you soon.
See you. Bye-bye. Thank you.